Good morning, everyone, and welcome on this very autumnal day to another Irwin Mitchell webinar. We're focusing this week very much on the key issues that can affect people, particularly when they're suffering in terms of their own personal mental health. Now, on Saturday, it's World Mental Health Day, and that's supported by the UN, which I wasn't aware actually, and it's a platform to raise awareness about mental health issues. The title of today's webinar is how to navigate life's ups and downs when it comes to money, relationship breakdown, divorce and death. Now you can ask questions throughout today, so please do so on the Q&A function. Try and leave your name and email address. If we don't get to your question, then we'll obviously contact you and come back to you. We are recording this event, so you will be able to, and it will be circulated, so you'll be able to watch it again if there's something in particular you wanted to pick up on, or you'll be able to share it with people. We're also going to put a feedback form, a link to a feedback form in the Q&A. Could you try and fill that in for us? We really want to know what you think. Whatever feedback, good, bad, ugly, let us know what you think. So we can try and get better at what we do and what we try and deliver to you. And also, if there's something else that you want to hear about, let us know. At Irwin Mitchell, we have a mission. We want to reach out to our clients, communities, colleagues, friends and family, really, to talk about issues that matter to you right now and to bring together groups of people who can perhaps give you some advice, signpost you, give you some tips and tricks, but just help you on the way, really. So I hope you've got a cup of tea, sit back, relax and enjoy today. We're going to start by introducing your panel today. We've got some great people for you to hear from today. I'll start by introducing myself and then we'll go around everybody. I'm Zara Pavani and I'm a family law partner here at Irwin Mitchell. And I look after people when they are going through divorce or relationship breakdown. I also deal with all manner of other family and children related issues from a legal perspective. Now, as a family lawyer, I think a lot of family lawyers would say this, part of our job is like being a counsellor. We have to hold the hand of our clients. They're really struggling at this time. But the reality is I'm not trained in terms of giving therapy. So it's always important to signpost to a professional. And that leads me on to my guest speaker today. Maggie, please do introduce yourself to the audience.
Good morning to everybody and thank you, Zara. Yeah, I'm a chartered clinical psychologist and I run my own business from which I do a whole range of things, primarily these days therapy. And I have worked with and known Zara over many years and have worked with a number of her clients over that period of many years. I also do work in the field of neuropsychological rehabilitation, and that takes me into an arena that has some relevance here, post-traumatic stress disorder. Actually, although I wouldn't pretend to suggest that divorce, for example, can cause PTSD, actually trauma is a significant issue at major points of turmoil in our life. And so there's real resonance across from those fields. The other aspects of my work include coaching and a degree of consultancy, although of late I've not had much time for that as the clinical work's been really busy in the context of the pandemic. Thank you, Zara.
Thank you so much. So next I'd like Anushka, who is an associate in our residential property team. And Anushka, please let everybody know a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Zara. Hi, everyone. So I'm Anushka Parker and I work in the London residential property team based in London normally when we're not at home. So personally, I deal with kind of high net worth individuals and private clients buying and selling homes. I work with the tax team as well, but nationally we kind of cover anything to do with residential property. So whether you're extending your lease, buying a second home, a country estate, we've got offices across the country in Sheffield, Gatwick, Chichester, London and Newbury, as well as an office in Glasgow for Scottish clients. So yeah, I've been at Irwin Mitchell for 18 months and yeah, anything residential property is what we do.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Anushka. That's really helpful. And David, last but not least, our gentleman on our panel today. David forms part of our Irwin Mitchell asset management arm. David, let everybody know a little bit about you.
Thanks, Sarah, and morning, everyone. I am a chartered financial planner, and my job is to meet with clients, to understand their financial situation and their future goals, and then to work with them in order to ensure that their finances are organised in the most tax efficient way, and also to develop a financial plan with them, a sort of roadmap in order to get them from where their finances currently are to where they want them to be in the future. And once this plan is in place, to make sure that it's regularly reviewed with them, to take account of any future life changes in legislation, and just make sure their plan is on track. So that's what keeps me busy for most of the day. And
no doubt keeps you out of trouble, David. Thank you for that. So in terms of, we're going to launch straight into this. So Maggie, you're our guest speaker, so I'm going to come to you first. Now, I would say, and it is very much my opinion, that there can be a fine line between having a mental health issue and actually just feeling, when I say just, I don't mean to belittle it, feeling low, stressed and depressed. Now, what advice would you give to someone trying to work out how they're feeling, or if they're trying to help a loved one who they're thinking, God, there's some serious issues here, I don't really know what to do? What advice would you give in terms of looking at GPs, looking at therapy, medication, or just, you know, sometimes, do we just sometimes need a time out, Maggie?
That's a really, really important question, Zara. And the crucial issue that I think can help inform our decision making in that context is the yardstick that I would use is the extent to which something is interfering with our daily life. So if we're having some rough days, some really blue days where we're struggling to get out of bed, struggling to get motivated, we're late for work, even if we're working remotely, then that's one thing, and that's not great. But that may mean that some talking, the opportunity to have some counselling, if you've not got immediate access to friends and family to talk things through with, that would be kind of par for the course. If at the other end of the continuum, actually you've not been out of bed for a week, you are really struggling to eat, your sleep is incredibly fragmented, then those, for example, are some really key signs of clinical depression, and it would be really wise to see your GP. And whilst medication is not the only show in town, actually there is a point when depression becomes very significant, and it's incredibly wise to have medication, which can make just a subtle but an important change to the biochemistry in our brain that allows us to then just address some of those very basic functions of daily living, like eating, like getting up, like having a good night's sleep, that will then start to leave you feeling a little bit more buoyant, and then you can start to address some of the factors that underpin the cause of the depression in the first place.
That's so helpful, Maggie. And I think I would add to that as well, in the sense that we've all been working from home, or we've been locked down in some way, shape or form, and I'm a really positive person, but I, as well as everybody else, you hit a wall at sometimes, don't you? And I've in the last few weeks thought, oh, I'm struggling a bit, and the first thing I've done is book a bit of time off. Have some days off, have some days out, and just, have some time to myself, really, whether that's a book or catching up with some friends over FaceTime or whatever. I just think it's so incredibly important. And that's really helpful, Maggie. Thank you. Anushka, I'm going to come to you next. Now, property related issues can form a big part of stress for people, in my view, in their lives, whether they're moving, selling or buying. I mean, isn't it up there? Isn't buying a house or moving up there with death and divorce, as something that can really affect you terribly? Tell us about what you're seeing in the marketplace at the moment. What's happening in the resi property world, and how I've heard of a lot of people struggling in this area. And if people are struggling, what can they do? Who do they turn to? How can we help them, Anushka? Let people know.
You're spot on, Zara, by saying it's an emotional process. I don't think I really fully, I became a property lawyer before I bought my own flat, and I didn't really realise quite how emotional it is. People aren't just selling 4 walls, they're selling a lifetime of memories, and for that can be really hard. Some people don't want to sell, they don't necessarily want to move, and along with it's a huge financial investment. Often timelines are tight and people don't do it very often, and so it's actually very important that people feel that they are being advised by people that they really do trust and that they can reach out to during, not necessarily compared to the time frame of a divorce. People can buy and sell within 2 to 3 months. It's a very intense, short period of time, but you need to know that the people representing you trust. At the moment, we are finding nationally that the market has gone mad, which is almost unheard of in a recession for a residential property market to be booming, but it is. So let's be grateful for that. And that seems to be across the board everywhere. So how can you kind of reduce the stress, and what would I recommend people do? I would definitely recommend people take time to instruct a solicitor based on recommendations, not necessarily on fees. In the market, generally across the board, I think you get what you pay for, and you know, the cheapest option isn't necessarily the best. Estate agents have bad rep, but I know a lot of estate agents out there who do a really great job and actually really help sales through. They are people. They're people. They're there at the end of the phone. Your solicitor, your agent should be able to answer any questions and kind of reassure you and give you honest answers. Thirdly, I would recommend a mortgage broker. Everyone knows that dealing with banks can be a nightmare. You can be on hold for hours just to get through to a generic person at customer services. But a mortgage broker is just another advisor out there to kind of help you, is on your team, and to hopefully help reduce some of the stresses.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Anushka. Really important. I think people, you know, are always nervous about reaching out to professionals. But I agree with you. I think in this current environment, particularly if you are struggling personally, hook up with a professional. Even if you just take the initial advice and then decide to progress matters on your own. I think all professionals out there, whether it be legal services community or otherwise, we are there to help and give some initial advice, guidance and signposting.
I would also add that a lot of people sometimes, you know, a question in your head can sometimes, I definitely find it, a question in my head can blow up and I can be worrying about it for hours, sleepless nights. But actually, if I ask someone who knows the answer, they go, God, don't worry about that. That is literally dealt with. Don't you worry about it. And so sometimes you just need to know that you can ask that question to someone, and I think that's the key really to dealing with stress.
Absolutely, thank you, Anushka. And I do think that people worry about this because they worry about it because they think they're going to get charged from the get-go. And I think that's important to know that we would hear, Anushka, I know I would, if someone's got a query, pick up the phone, ask us a question. The clock doesn't start ticking. We'll give you a quote if it needs to go any further. But, you know, we should be able to help or signpost, and I think that's really important. Now, David, I want to come to you. You're sitting there very patiently, and I have a question for you. Money is a massive cause of stress for people. And these days, whether it doesn't matter how old you are, money is just so difficult, and in the current environment, and it can catapult you into feeling incredibly vulnerable and under pressure. And I appreciate, as we've been talking to Anushka about, the right thing to do is to speak to somebody, but really speaking to a financial advisor, people can really freak out about that because they can think, well, I don't even know everything I need to know. I don't even know what the questions are to get the right information. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what I need to ask you. So how do I even approach you? So tell me, what would you say to people who are thinking, well, I probably need a financial advisor, but I don't even know where to start? How do you deal with that? What do you see?
Well, I think you're absolutely right, Sarah. I think some clients do find it difficult to get in touch with a financial planner or advisor. The first thing to recognise, of course, as a client, is that if money is causing you stress, then unless you do something about it, it's always going to be a source of stress. So you do need to take some action. And although the thought of a meeting might be daunting, if you don't feel confident in dealing with finances yourself, don't be afraid to speak with family, friends, colleagues, people close to you about it, and don't be afraid also to ask them to come along to the meeting. I mean, it's something that a financial planner may well offer anyway, and it's something that they'll be well used to dealing with. Certainly clients shouldn't feel embarrassed or intimidated by meeting a financial planner. I mean, most experienced advisors are pretty difficult to shock or surprise, simply because they've seen so many different clients, and there's not much new out there. I'm dealing with a client at the moment, and have been dealing with her for the past year or so, who's been going through quite a difficult divorce, and during their long marriage, he dealt with the husband. Her husband dealt with all of their finances, really. And when I first spoke with her on the phone prior to the meeting, it was clear that she was quite anxious about things. She was worried that she might be asked for information that she didn't have, or she'd be asked questions that she didn't know the answer to. So we agreed to meet, that the first meeting should be with her daughter present, just to give her a bit of support and a bit of reassurance. And for most of the first meeting, really, we just chatted about what we do as financial planners, and how things are for her currently, and what her plans are for the future, because it was clear that she needed to go at a certain pace. And I think that's really important, that clients should be given the time to go at their pace. And on that point, I'd say most financial planners will give you at least an hour of their time at a first meeting, free of charge. So it's an opportunity, really, to understand what a planner or an advisor can do for you as a client, and to explore whether they can help. So I would say, take the time, don't be rushed, don't feel pressurized into doing something that you don't feel comfortable with. What to look for in a financial planner, and how to find the right one. Well, Anushka mentioned it earlier. It's a question of trust, really. You need somebody appropriately qualified, of course, but that's fairly easy to check. Trust is something more personal, and somebody that puts things across in a way that you can relate to. So it really is quite a personal thing. But again, I think use family, use friends, use colleagues, use professionals that you're dealing with, solicitors, accountants, who might be able to make a recommendation and point you in the right direction.
That's really helpful. Thanks, David. And do you know what I think I would add to that as well is, if you're suffering with mental health or difficult issues, it might be because you're in a bit of a financial mess. And what I would say is, you don't need to see an advisor or a planner just because you've got lots of money and lots of money to invest. Actually, when you're struggling financially, planners can help you manage your overdraft, your loans, your debts, or point you in the direction of what you can do to kind of get better or improve your credit rating or come out of a difficult situation. So don't feel you can't approach somebody. I mean, I remember when I started out, and law school loans and debts and overdrafts, I saw a planner quite early on just to help me figure out how I was going to manage all these pots of debt. And then the other thing I would say is, I wish somebody had told me, and I'm hearing it a lot on the radio at the moment, start saving when you're in your 20s. If you can put something away or put something towards a pension, the younger you are, the better it is to do it. And I just think, so you don't, this is not a case of if you've got a lot of money, you don't need to have a lot of money to take that advice in the first instance. I think that's really important. So thank you, David. Maggie, I'm going to come to you next. You and I, as you said at the beginning, have dealt with a lot of people who have gone through some really difficult divorce and other family related issues. And divorce is, an incredibly emotive and tough time for people. And it can really be a trigger point, I think, in terms of mental health issues, whether before they get into the divorce process, during it, or as you say, after it, the recovery process. What are your thoughts? What are you seeing at the moment? And what advice can we give to people out there?
I mean, my first comment is absolutely to agree with you. For somebody who's got mental health issues, but they've managed to sort of battle on, they've kind of got on with life, they've found a whole range of coping strategies, and then divorce looms on the horizon, that can be the tipping point that then tips them kind of quite literally over the edge. But for other people who haven't got mental health issues, And then a divorce comes out of nowhere. And indeed, some of the clients that you've referred to me, it has been those people, hasn't it? It's somebody for whom they thought they were in a happy relationship. They discover their partner's been having an affair for years. And it's as though somebody's driven the proverbial coach and horses through the middle of their lives. Everything's come crashing down around them. And whilst they might have thought that hitherto they were a very resilient person, it's more than resilience sometimes that we need to get through something like that. And to reinforce the messages from my colleagues on the panel, absolutely having the right kind of advice throughout that process is crucial. Because, of course, divorce is something that suddenly can take control from us. And what we know in terms of our mental health is that stress disorder, anxiety disorder, depression, a whole raft of mental health issues, one of the fundamental themes that has changed, that means that it's become a problem, is that we cease to feel in control. Now, there's an old saying, isn't there? Information is power, and that doesn't come out of nowhere. Actually, if in the middle of chaos, you can have some planks around you, you can start to build your kind of flood barricade, or whichever metaphor we might need. Is probably because I've been sitting with the rain pouring on the windows. Then that's better. So get some certainty, get some facts, get facts about your house, get facts about the law in terms of your children, a divorce, get facts about your money, and get facts about your mental well-being. And indeed, a number of the clients that we've worked with, kind of in effect jointly, actually their mental well-being has become so strained that it has been important for them to seek an appointment with their GP. And for some of them, it's been really important to have some medication. For others, it's been important to have just the chance to chat with a really good friend. But for many people, it's not something you want to kind of bare your entire soul about to your closest friend, when actually you're deeply ashamed and embarrassed about some of the stuff that's coming out, for example, or you feel so out of control and they've always known you as the life and soul of the party, the fun person. I've had that said to me so many times. Well, they don't know me like this. I don't like me like this. And that can be when it can be really helpful to have someone to talk to. And kind of linking back to your earlier question, there it's horses for courses. If you literally just kind of need someone to talk with, then a counsellor is often the very best person. They'll spend time with you, they'll reflect things back to you, they'll give you the space to think and talk. If, however, it started to really interfere with your daily life and you're really struggling to keep everything together, then potentially you're getting to a point where therapy would be helpful, where active treatment to help you kind of get life back on the rails is going to be really, really important, and will then help you to manage your part in the divorce, your part in caring for and about your children and their future welfare in the context of divorce. It'll help you to do that much, much better.
That's fantastic, Maggie. And, I'm also going to say at this point, and this is not just because you're our guest speaker, I have said this before and I'll say it again. You don't have to be going through a divorce or going through a tough time to speak to a coach or a counsellor. You can actually be in a really good, positive position, but it staves off difficulties. We're all going to, regardless of COVID, we're all going to have challenges at certain points in our life, whether it be progressing your career, whether it be getting married, divorced, a promotion, a knockback, a rejection. We're all going to, if you're not in a relationship and, it's hard to go out and obviously meet anybody at this moment in time, so many things that can affect us. I'd love to follow the Americans, if I'm honest. I think we should all have a therapist. I literally think it's as important as gym membership or anything like that. I think sitting and speaking to somebody independent once a month, once a quarter, 2 or 3 times a year, the value in that is incredible. I liken
it to having a massage for the brain. I feel like, if you go into when you go to a full body spa and you just lie on a bed and you just relax and you come out and you're like, oh God, my muscles feel great. Whereas if you go and have a session with a therapist and just talk about yourself for an hour with someone who's not judging you, is not going to remember, not going to pass what you say to someone else. Your brain, it just kind of just goes,
yeah,
it clears the smoke. I think, I'm so pro it.
Could not have described it better, Anushka. That is incredible, actually. I really like what you've said there, and I think that's important for everybody, actually. So if you haven't used a coach before, you should really think of one, whether you reach out to Maggie or you need to use somebody else. You know, we all have contacts that we're happy to help you with. I've been reading a lot about resilience during this, how to maintain your resilience. And there are two things I would recommend: an independent coach, but use a coach on your team meetings and your team with your co-workers and your colleagues, and they will give you a session to help you lift them. And I just think things like that are so incredibly important. So thank you, Maggie, and thank you, Anushka. I think that's a brilliant analogy. I love it. And coming to you again, Anushka, and guys, I can see some questions coming through are great. Please keep the questions coming through, and there's some observations as well. We will literally come to them. Looking forward to exploring some of those. I can see 2 or 3 already on there. Anushka, so people are concerned about property valuations right now, and you've alluded to the fact that that we're in a recession, but there is a property boom. So yep. People are concerned about property valuations, and we're seeing a lot of people wanting to move out of the city, wanting to move out of the city of London and get to those remote areas where they're going to feel a bit more safe, perhaps long term, and for their families and for their children. But other people who can't afford to move are sometimes feeling trapped in certain places. What are you seeing? What's happening in this scenario? What are you seeing?
I mean, generally across the country, it seems that people want more space. I think the fear of a second lockdown coming and the fear of kind of being stuck in the same 4 walls without any outside space is a real big deal at the moment. So that really is the trend that we are seeing. You allude to kind of people feeling that they can't afford to. In that situation, again, go and speak to someone like David to assess what you can and can't afford. Speak to a mortgage broker. A lot of these advisors out there aren't there just to get you as a client and get the whole deal through. They're happy to explore options, and are very well aware that you might want to go and speak to a mortgage broker to see what you can afford, and then in 6 months' time go and talk to them and say, actually, now I want to kind of get the ball rolling. So we are seeing that people want more space. It's a strange market at the moment because it's all very unknown. We've got the stamp duty holiday, so buyers are definitely benefiting from that, and it feels like the prices are slightly gone up a little bit because of this. There's a strong demand for properties. But equally, people are a bit nervous because when the furlough scheme comes to an end, when the stamp duty holiday comes to an end, are redundancies across the board, is that going to affect people? But I don't have a fortune telling ball. I can't tell you what's going to happen. But the property market is pretty resilient. Like it does, it's usually the first hit. It dropped dead in April and May, but it's bounced back. It normally does. Central London is where I'm based at the moment. The worry is that people are all moving out and they're not going to come back. But life will, whether we like it or not, resume to some form of normality in time. And we are living in the centre of, it's the capital of our country. Business will still focus around London, so people will come back. So that's kind of it, really.
Yes,
that's my take on the market at the moment.
Thank you, Anushka. That's really, really helpful, actually. I think you're right. We're all, it's difficult at the moment. We may well be in and out of lockdown for some time, but ultimately we would hope that we're going to resume to some, it might be a different norm, it might be different, but we'll be back in some way, shape or form. And I think it's good to have a positive outlook and be sensible, make sensible decisions, take advice and make sensible decisions. So coming to you, David, people are really worried about the markets, the economy, their jobs. Financial security is just so important to people, and they're really worried. People are feeling insecure and out of control. Some people are feeling paralysed by this and therefore doing nothing. Now, as I understand it, sometimes in a recession, it can be the land of opportunity. What are your thoughts around this?
Well, you're quite right. It is a worrying time, and as you can imagine, my colleagues and I, we've spent most of our time this year discussing the market falls with clients and how it affects their finances and future investment prospects. It's from a point of view of job security and what people how to deal with the fact that an income might stop, it's always a good idea to keep a cash buffer in case of circumstances like that. Maybe 6 to 12 months expenses, keep in cash, so that if something goes wrong, you've got cash that you can fall back on without taking money out of investments when it may be not such a good time to do so. In terms of currently being a good time to invest, taking a long-term view, I would certainly agree. It probably is. Most of the best stock market returns come after market falls, because the recovery comes off such a low base. But bear in mind that timing the market is impossible to do consistently. At least I've never met anyone who's done it consistently. So it's vital to have a plan for your investments and stick to it. Stick to that plan. So don't be knocked off course by what we're currently experiencing. I've been in this industry for about 25 years, and in that time, there's never been a period of time where there hasn't been something to fret about in the investment market. You know, there's always been a reason not to invest. We've had the dot-com bubble bursting in 2000, 2001, had the financial crash in 2008. If you look back, though, at the performance of markets over that period, there have been some really significant returns, despite all the headwinds and upsets. So I would agree, when we're going through a crisis, often is the best time to invest, because markets are cheap and crises don't last forever. As Anushka was saying earlier, we will come out of this pandemic, and although not all companies will survive, most will, and many will adapt and prosper and sort of change to whatever the new normal is. So don't be panicked by markets, either panicked into selling or into buying. You know, when markets do recover, they can bounce back quite quickly, and there can be an urge to panic buy. Make sure you take a longer term view. If you have a lump sum to invest, it's often a good idea, instead of just putting it all into the market in one go, to drip feed it in monthly over a period of time, to kind of smooth out the volatility in the markets. And I would also say that just as money can be a huge source of stress if your finances are not in great shape, having a financial planning, having a clear understanding of what you're working towards can equally be quite empowering, and can give you a sense of financial well-being. So as you were saying earlier, Sarah, you know, even if you don't have a huge amount to invest, taking the first step, I suppose, is the most important thing. And as you said earlier, you know, the sooner you get that money in, the longer it's got to grow, and the more difference it's going to make to you in the long term.
Absolutely, that's really helpful, David. And you know, the flip side being, as I've said, is it's not just if you've got money. If your business has failed, if you've been furloughed, if you've really struggled financially and you are in a real hole and there's no way to get out, you feel there's no way to get out, I think, you know, there are still avenues to help you. So speaking to an advisor, whether it be somebody from an emotional point of view, from a medical point of view, or a professional point of view, we can always give you advice, guidance, and signpost you. I work in a sector that's predominantly high net worth, but I still speak to, and I will always say to everybody, it doesn't matter how big or small your case is, it doesn't matter whether there is any money or not, speak to me. I will help. I will give you some initial advice and guidance, and I will help signpost you to a good professional who can help you, whether it be from a legal aid point of view, whether you need CAB assistance, whatever you need, I will give you the initial advice. And I think that's what we're about here, which I think is really important. Now, coming on to another issue before we hit the questions and the observations, which we absolutely will do. Maggie, I want to come to you again. So we know that this is a time when people have been suffering bereavements, and that feeling of loss is so overwhelming and really, really can cause such long-term anxiety and difficulty. What are you seeing, and how are people dealing with current losses? And as I think you alluded to earlier, perhaps before we started recording and on this, it's not just about people dying, but it's about people who have been really, really ill, who are back on track but still struggling. What have you been seeing, Maggie?
I think if I were to try and summarise that, it's almost, and how can you summarise kind of disparate challenges that are enormous to the individuals, but the loss at the moment I think is really getting magnified, you know, because my fundamental advice would be that if one's bereaved, actually just try to hold on to some connections and reach out. And of course, reaching out when you can see somebody in person, when they can give you a huge hug, when they can bring you some shopping and sit and have a chat is one thing. Reaching out when you have been isolated for several months, you may have been shielding, you know, when the whole raft of the restrictions that we've been living under have really borne down on you, can be a very, very different thing. And so there is a real sense to me of loss being magnified. And, you know, I'm speaking to somebody at the moment who lost their wife very suddenly. It was cancer. But the fact that they already feel very stressed and very strained about the prospect of going out of the house, their age and their own health profile means that they are at risk. They also then feel really compromised going out of the house because they're terrified somebody's going to ask them how they are and they're going to burst into tears, and that's the last thing they want to do. And so the prison that they feel that they're in is really, you know, the walls are getting higher. And the thing that I would say is, and in particular in that situation, it's very hard for that, it's been hard for that individual to reach out, and somebody else has reached out for them and said, I think some help would be a really good plan. And I guess that would be one of my messages, you know, and sadly at any given point, we may all know somebody who's been bereaved or somebody who is caring for someone who's very, very ill. Keep reaching out, find ways of reaching out, let that person know that you're there for them. And in particular at this time, when the sorts of kind of voluntary and charitable organisations that I would often point people to in the first instance, they're beleaguered. They've got big waiting lists because sadly there is a significant demand in the context of the pandemic and the enormity of the losses. And, you know, and why I say I would point people there in the first instance is grief is awful, but grief is normal and it's natural. And I would never ever want to pathologise. I describe something as an illness that is a normal natural process. Now we can have lots of normal natural processes that are hellishly difficult to deal with, and we need help, but we need the right kind of help that's well matched. And at a point like now, when actually the system's creaking, in many ways, it means that it's even more important that we look out for people, that we stay connected. I had a friend WhatsApp me a few weeks ago, and she was really insistent. She kept messaging me, Maggie, I've not heard from you. Are you all right? And I thought, well, what? You know, we hadn't spoken for months, and typically we'll catch up and have a great long catch up. It used to be in person. It's, you know, tended to be over the phone since. And she was clearly really worried. And I dropped everything and got straight away in touch with her. And I said, why are you so worried? The last person who hadn't responded had died. You know, she was determined, and I'm sorry to be fairly morbid, but she was absolutely determined to reach out. Now that determination, actually, it's really important that we have that sense, not of obligation, but of connection. And so often when somebody's grieving, all they need is somebody to reach out as a first port of call, actually to check, you know, some of the people that I'm working with, you know, their partner was the person who was the mainstay of the domestic environment. And, you know, for some people, they kind of they find their way through that. You know, I remember my father, when my mother was very ill and then died, he laughed about the fact that he discovered that you don't put socks in a dryer. He said, I've got all these socks, they'd be great for a toddler. I've bought a load of new socks. Now that was fine because my dad, you know, and he was really well supported. We were well connected with him. He was able to laugh. Sometimes putting your socks in the dryer and them all shrinking is the pivot point at which your world feels like it's come tumbling down, because there you are, you're full of grief and actually you can't do some of the real basics just to keep yourself kind of functioning. So reach out, but when you reach out, if your sense is that the person you're reaching out to actually needs more, again, help. You've used the term signposting, Zara, you know, help to connect them, maybe go along to the GP with them, maybe take them to, or maybe sit with them when they're having their first counselling session with Cruise, who are an amazing organisation and do fabulous bereavement counselling. Connections are key here.
Thank you, Maggie. That's really powerful stuff. And, you know, I think what we'd say is, given the week it is and the day it is on Saturday, if you take nothing else away from today, I think reaching out to somebody just to make sure they're okay is going to be fantastic and an amazing thing to do. And also,
would you agree also, well, everyone, you know, reaching out both in kind of a friendly and also in a professional capacity as well. I think a lot of professionals across the board, you know, especially working from home, people hide behind emails, and clients potentially are worried to ask a question, so they put it in an email. You know, I haven't actually said it if I send it in an email, whereas actually people need to pick up the phone, and if there's a problem in the divorce, in the house you're buying or selling, and very often these bigger issues kind of permeate down into the day-to-day issues. So it's probably the socks in the tumble dryer that are the straw that broke the camel's back, but actually that stemmed from a question because they were worried about, you know, the completion date of their house and not being able to get, you know. And I think that just generally across the board, everyone needs to be better at phones and not always just sending a text or sending an email. Let's just try and open everything up, I think is well what I would hope would help everyone in kind of daily challenges. You know, people, you know, look at the big picture, but actually just day-to-day insecurities, day-to-day worries, day-to-day challenges, just pick up the phone. So I think that's a
really good message, Anushka, a really good message. And for people that we know that can't get connected, I think reach out to them. And for other people who are struggling really in terms of finding an avenue, being signposted, I think the key is there are so many resources just on the internet as well that you can Google as a starting point, that you might be able to read something that might resonate with you to find a few steps moving forward. Because, you know, you might not be connected to us and watching this webinar today, but you might be able to help somebody find another connection that maybe is at a level that suits them. Now let's look at some of the questions and observations we've had. Let's have a look. So first of all, let's have a look. See if I can do this. Somebody's asked, is there any information about navigating financial settlements in divorce with spouses who won't communicate, return contact? Yes, I mean, we do see that happen quite a lot, and more so at the moment. You might be ready to move forward in your divorce, but the other person isn't, and they're either not responding because they just physically and emotionally are not able, or because they want to be difficult and block you. You can move past them. You can move forward even without their consent, communication. There are avenues open to you, and ultimately a court will take your case further as long as you can prove that you've served proceedings on that person. So there are many things that you can do. So I would say take specific advice on that, and if that person wants to follow up and email me, I'll happily have an initial chat with them. There'll be no charge whatsoever. You know, I'm very happy to have a chat with you. So somebody else has asked a question. Even if you're married, is it still sensible and necessary to create powers of attorney regarding your spouse for medical and financial reasons? And the answer is yes, because even if you're married and you have you're holding all the money and somebody else isn't, and then that person who's holding all the money doesn't have capacity for any reason, you're going to struggle to access their finances to support the household. So having lasting powers of attorney and getting them registered is really important. And again, if you email myself or Anushka, we can signpost you to somebody in our national team who can help you with that further. Coming to you, Anushka, it's a comment really, which I think we should explore if we can. Somebody has said, please remember tenants, and we've talked a lot about people buying, selling. Please remember tenants who have less stability and power in this current situation. So tell me, what would you say about, and I know we have specific teams of people in our organisation there to help tenants who are struggling perhaps with difficult landlords or with landlords who are struggling. Any comments on that, Anushka, please?
I mean, I think I'm not a particular landlord and tenant expert, but what I hear is, people need to be communicating with their landlords. Again, it links back to kind of speaking with people and exploring options that are available. I guess, landlord to landlord will vary. They themselves will probably also be, under financial strain. It always trickles up or down, doesn't it? It goes both ways. But if from a tenant's perspective, I definitely think it's worthwhile speaking to landlords, working out what the next 3-6 month plan is, and if necessary, again, taking professional advice in relation to your finances, speaking to the banks, and again, just talking to the advisors out there, and there are many of them who are there on your side and there to help.
Absolutely. And if you're not going to approach, even if you don't know who to approach and you're a tenant who's struggling, there are some really good links. Or if you look at the Law Society or the Law Society in particular, they will point you to specialists who deal with landlord and tenant work that could help, actually. Now, we had a controversial comment from somebody, which I value and I welcome. And somebody is saying, sorry, this is all focusing on middle class issues, spas, monthly therapy, buying a house, savings. These are daily challenges made worse by the insecurity of today's environment. I agree with you. We have talked about people being able to do things and people with money, but hopefully we've also, as I've tried to say as we've talked throughout, if you are struggling and your business has gone bust and you may think you're losing your house and some terrible things are happening in your world, what we would say here at IM, or if you want to look on the internet, there is support and resource out there to help you, regardless of where you are in terms of, where you are in terms of your wealth or otherwise. Somebody could have been quite wealthy and has lost a great deal of wealth and is really struggling, and as a result has lost their relationship and has lost some power and control. The panel today can help you, and there are further resources on the internet, and we have internal resources. We want to help. It's not just about people who have money, it's about everybody. We think that's really important. I've got another question here, David, that I'm going to bring to you. With such a depressed economy, is it your expectation that interest rates will stay lower for longer? How do you think this will impact the property market going forwards? Are you seeing an increase in people willing to take on increased leverage to benefit from lower rates? There's a lot of questions here. What is the most important driver in the housing boom? Lower rates, stamp duty, holidays, desperate need for space? That latter question I'll come to you, Anushka, but if you start off with this interest rate question, please, David.
With the interest rates lower for longer, I think that's probably true. I think they are going to remain depressed for quite a period of time. The world is currently pretty heavily indebted, and higher interest rates wouldn't suit the servicing of that debt. And I think there's limited scope actually to raise interest rates too far. So yes, I do think interest rates are probably going to remain lower. Yes.
And thank you, David. Anushka, so what is the most important driver, do you think? It's a difficult question in the housing boom. Lower rates, stamp duty holiday, desperate need for space?
I don't know exactly. I mean, we did a survey across the country, spoke to estate agents up and down from Sheffield down to from Chichester, and asked whether they agreed, whether they thought the stamp duty holiday had maybe came a bit early, and the general consensus was that no, it didn't. It's really helped when we were in a pretty dark place. April, May, the stamp duty holiday came in. People are really benefiting from that. You know, anyone buying below 500,000 is not paying stamp duty, so that's been a massive boost for a lot of buyers, especially first-time buyers. The need for more space, I guess that is up to what buyers and what's happening in the kind of country as a whole. You know, if we are threatened with a second lockdown, then I would imagine the drive for outside space will be a big factor that people will want, because they, you know, that is that people are realizing they're spending more time at home, and the option of going to gyms or to the park have gone. So I imagine, you know, that is a big driving force. The stamp duty has been a question on everyone's lips for a number of years. When it changed in 2015, you know, certain parts of the market was stifled at that point, specifically investment properties and, you know, the upper end, so high net worth individuals, overseas investors. So the stamp duty is always a question on people's lips. Has it benefited the market, the holiday? I think it has. Will it be extended? Possibly. I don't think it would be a bad thing if it was. Sorry, you're on mute.
Thank you. So one more, thank you for that, Anushka. One more question we've had: how to remove an ex-partner from the mortgage as the couple are no longer living together and he or she is refusing to contribute to half the mortgage or accept a buyout. Really difficult situation to be in, but ultimately there is a legal option. The court will say that the two of you, if you're no longer in a relationship and you no longer want to be tied to a mortgage with somebody, you are allowed to get out of that. And I would, again, if you want to email me direct, I will talk you through your own personal circumstances around that. But ultimately, you can make an application to the court to force somebody's hand in this situation, which is not great. And usually what we find in this situation, when somebody isn't responding or won't agree to sensible negotiation, once we say, listen, this is the offer, we're making you this offer, we want to avoid court proceedings, nobody wants to spend money on lawyers, we usually find that things settle quite quickly. And it's only in very extreme circumstances that we say, listen, if you're not going to settle reasonably, we're going to have no choice but to issue a court application, and we really don't want to do this. Let's think about this. And the other way to avoid court proceedings is you can Google something called mediation and make a referral to mediation, where two people can get together, air their grievances, and hopefully reach a mutually beneficial and satisfying deal between the two of them, really. So, you know, with some of these questions that are quite bespoke or specific, please feel free to contact me direct. I'm more than happy to have a conversation with you.
Zara, now, can I just very quickly interject just onto that specific question about the mortgage? A lot of people I'm finding just overlook this. They want to, if they're going through divorce or separating, and they forget that actually the property legal title needs to reflect what has been agreed. So if they're getting a new mortgage in one of their names because they want to take on the property themselves, the legal title of the property also needs to reflect what's on the mortgage deed. And so what's really helpful is if people speak to mortgage brokers at the same time as speaking to a family lawyer, because then they kind of, all the ducks can kind of come into a row at the same time, and they're aware that they need to get a new mortgage offer, and they will need to get their own personal financial circumstances assessed to take it on and take it forward. So that's just another kind of, I guess, way how IM all work together, and you know, with the right advisors in place, it can be a much more relaxing or straightforward experience than if you don't otherwise think about those.
Absolutely, thank you, Anushka. No, that's really, really important. And as family lawyers, we always say you've got to go explore how you're going to buy this person out. You've got to be able to remove them for the mortgage. So that's really, really helpful, Anushka. Somebody's actually commented on how much does mediation cost. It varies dramatically depending on where you are geographically. I know that geography doesn't matter as much, but where you are in the country and what kind of mediator you use. So a lawyer mediator can be more expensive than a qualified mediator. But again, if you Google mediation, you'll see some helpful links, and also Google Law Society mediators and Resolution First for Family Law mediators, and that can be a really helpful sphere to look at. So we're running out of time, we're running on. We've got 4 minutes left, and what I want to do is remind people, please do fill in the feedback questionnaire. We want to know your comments, as I said earlier, good, bad or ugly, and let us know what else you want to hear about. Really, we do have further webinars this week, really to mark World Mental Health Awareness. You can see them up on the screen right now, so you can click onto the links to be able to sign up to any of those webinars. Also, you can look at the IM web page, and that will really help you as well. So all that remains for me is to say an incredibly big thank you. I mean, everybody does this, and this takes time and trouble out of everybody's day, and we're all busy and we've all got a lot to do. So firstly, thank you so much to Maggie. You've been incredible. Your insight has been invaluable. We really appreciate it. Anushka, I know you haven't done many of these before. This may well be your first, and you've done an incredible job. So thank you so much. And David, as ever, good to work with you again. And everybody out there today, I think the one thing we'd like to leave you with is today, however small, reach out to somebody. It'll make a positive difference. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.